Well, that's a consequence of living in New York City. Alright, today I want to talk about this article from The Cut, from the New York magazine. Are we all living beyond our means now? By Claire Lampin. Tagline: with rising costs of living, debt, and the doom scroll to checkout pipeline, we're overspending more than ever. Yeah, I can't say I relate too much because I'm incredibly strict about my spending. I'm not trying to flex or dunk on anyone. I'm just saying this is definitely an important topic, so be sure to give this video a like and subscribe for daily videos. Comment your thoughts along the way. It would mean a lot to me to hear back from you. When Sarah first entered the workforce at 21, she was already in debt. Her sophomore year of college, one of her parents suddenly lost their job. No, one of her parents suddenly lost their job. And because her school used the family's now outdated financial information to calculate her need, she was denied financial aid. Sarah, whose real name isn't actually Sarah, took out a total of $45,000 in student loans, 15,000 federal, 30,000 private, in order to finish her degree. Honestly, I'm kind of curious what the degree was in. I mean, I, as I've said in previous videos, you should I would only ever recommend taking out loans for college if you are striving to be a doctor, a lawyer, or any other high-paying professional, and you can start paying it back right away, or sooner rather than later. She says she's since paid about $60,000 on the private debt alone. I loved my education, she says. I would never take back my experience or the friends that I made, but it royally fucked my future. That it definitely did. I mean, I'm really sorry to hear that one of your parents lost their job, but at a certain point, there has to be a level of prioritization. Well, also again, Sarah in this story is an adult, and it's her choice. I'm not going to hold it against her. The reason I'm talking about this is because I want to put this out as a warning against going to college without a plan, which is what I did, and look where I am now. With no full-time job lined up after graduation, Sarah took on as many freelance gigs as she could and moved in with a relative outside New York City while she looked for work. Barely able to manage the $150 monthly payment on her federal loan, she deferred on her private debt, causing the interest to explode. This marked the beginning of a punishing cycle that may sound familiar to millennials, who carry nearly 50% of the nation's student loan debt. When you take on staggering debt as a teenager, it becomes especially difficult not to accrue more of it. The cost of repayment and rent alone may cannibalize the bulk of an entry-level paycheck. Once Sarah found full-time work paying $27,000 per year, she had to send around $450 per month to her creditors. This is exactly why I think people should have to propose how they're going to pay back student loans if they are planning to go into college. I'm not saying people don't have to go if they don't want to, but I am saying that having a plan, knowing what to do, and maybe deciding to quit if it's not going to pan out. Just some food for thought. Honestly, if I were in charge of the whole student loan system, here's what I'd do. I would make it so that they had to propose the ROI and basically propose it the way you would have to propose a bank loan. Like, you need to have a plan. I am going to take these classes. I am going to do XYZ to make sure that I have a job lined up. And this is how much money I can expect to make based on the facts. Thank you for your consideration. That, or I'd require the colleges to guarantee a job or your money back, or if you're taking out loans, the government's money back. Yeah, I can understand the burden of finding a job being on the individual, but at a certain point, if you're asking to have this kind of time and money invested into the education, there needs to be a guarantee of a job outcome, at least starting with a job. Obviously, if it doesn't pan out, that's a different story, and then, well, you're in debt now. But I'm just saying that making it a little harder to take out loans by making it by requiring a proposition that includes a detailed plan of the ROI and all that. There's a reason that banks do that. I'm just going to leave it at that. Oh, one more thing. None of this is financial advice. This is just me talking, giving my own opinion. That sum ballooned with every pay bump she received, precluding any possibility of saving, putting her in a precarious position when, a couple of years later, a medical emergency landed her in the ER. She says the hospital confirmed it took her insurance, but an apparent administrative mix-up left her with a $20,000 bill. The only money she had to give them came from the pool she'd set aside to pay her freelance taxes. Now, she owed not only her doctors, but also the IRS. With creditors looming on all sides, Sarah ignored the medical debt, praying she could run out New York's statute of limitations. But the tax and student debt were always there and always growing. Although Sarah, now in her mid-30s, eventually managed to pay off her federal loan, she barely touched the principal on her private loan. In February 2024, her partner paid off the remainder of her student debt. Ah, that was nice of him. Sending him her freelance income, annual bonus, and tax returns, She's already repaid him $10,000. Had that not happened, she says, I think I would have died with this loan. But even as she has grown her career from assistantships to a senior level communications position, she still struggles to square compounding debt against the demands of living in the painfully expensive city where her industry is centered, scrambling less to get ahead and more to stay afloat. Obligations come up, Sarah says. Your parents sick? You have to go visit them. She also wants to be able to show up for the milestones, the bachelorette parties, the weddings, the baby showers, even if the expense of it is intense, and even if it means putting the flights on Afterpay. Then there are the things she wants to afford herself: shopping for vintage clothing, seeing a movie, buying plants and seeds for her community garden, taking a $30 ferry to Sandy Hook Beach as a treat in the summer. Am I really going to, not live a life? She wonders. I'm in my 30s. I'm going on a va- I'm going to go on a vacation. I'm going to buy some things for myself. I've sacrificed so much for over a decade. Well, I'm trying not to be the bearer of bad news, but you made the choice to take out the loan. Yes, there was the extenuating circumstance of one of your parents losing their job, but at a certain point, there are consequences sometimes, and the only thing we can control is ourselves. I mean, I don't blame you for wanting to do some nice things and live a life. I'm looking forward to getting my Nintendo Switch 2 whenever they finally put up pre-orders and I can get it on June 5th. I'm looking forward to. No, not that. I enjoy going to the Museum of Science. I enjoy going to places like that, the New England Aquarium and the Franklin Park Zoo. Now, I haven't done those as often, and I've barely left the area since the start of the year. But sometimes you have to give up on things you enjoy or take a step back or something like that. Like, I would not hold it against Enster for going to Sandy Hook Beach as a treat in the summer. I'm actually thinking of setting aside some money so that I can go to Houghton's Pond or the Blue Hills in general when the weather gets nicer and I can go out on a weekday where I don't have to deal with the same amount of crowds. But at a certain point, you have to accept that there are some things you're not going to be able to go out and do until you pay off your debt or something like that. Again, if you can make it work, go for it. Otherwise, like Sam Witwicky's great great grandfather said in Transformers, the 2007 movie, no sacrifice, no victory. There is this idea entered into internet canon by a multimillionaire circa 2017 that millennials have sacrificed any possibility of future home ownership on the altar of avocado. We cannot control our discretionary spending, so we will never know the financial stability enjoyed by our boomer parents. But what of our commitment to the side hustle? We are the generation most likely to grow up likely to work multiple jobs, not because we share an innate love of entrepreneurship, but because we inherited a grim economic reality. Many millennials, as well as members of Gen Z, need more than one income stream to make a livable wage. Sarah, for instance, manages two freelance gigs on top of her 9 to 6. Never in my life did I think that when I was making six figures, I would need to have additional sources of income, she says. Well, that's a consequence of living in New York City, one of, if not the most expensive areas to live in the entire country. But hey, if you can't find work in your field literally anywhere else, by all means, go ahead, live in New York City. I didn't leave college with debt, but like Sarah, I spent the first few years of my working life padding out a measly salary with side gigs. I graduated from unpaid internships to a career in notoriously underpaid industry, living in some of the world's most expensive cities. First New York, then London, now Paris. Routinely spending more than I arguably should feels normal to me now, a fact of life in the vein of obsessively vacuuming up the clouds of cat hair that collect in the corners of my overpriced studio apartment each morning. Maddening, but unavoidable. I don't count on ever being able to buy a home on my own, less because I am frittering away all my money on brunch and more because the combined ever climbing costs of living, groceries, rent, healthcare, a trip to the pharmacy, devour the majority of my income, leaving very few crumbs. I know I should be sweeping these into my IRA, but what's the point of moving to these places if I'm not going to get out and experience them? I'm not necessarily living within my means, but then again, I don't know many people who are. Well, there is a way that you could afford to buy a house, but you're not going to like it. You're going to have to move where the houses are cheaper. And that might mean moving quite far away from major metropolitan areas. For example, I am in the greater Boston area. So basically, most of the eastern half of Massachusetts, most houses I looked up were at least $500,000. Meanwhile, I explored northern Texas and I found a decent place that I could live in my own on my own for a grand total of $50,000. It depends on what you value. If you value everything that comes with living in the area that you live in, by all means. I myself have been am making plans at the time of recording to enjoy going into Boston to do something that I would not be able to do anywhere else in the country because there's something very specific to Boston. But at a certain point, you have to choose. And if I had some money and I had to move somewhere else, had my choice, I'd probably go to North Texas where I found that $50,000 home after assessing all the other things I'd need. Like I looked up doctor's offices, grocery stores, etc. for all of that. So I could order grocery deliveries and still go to the doctor's as needed. But I digress. Right now, chronically overspending seems to be the default mode for many people. The United States may be teetering on the brink of recession, which, were it to happen, could be as devastating as the 2008 crash that happened during Sarah's college years, at least according to some experts. Even workers whose inflation adjusted earnings have consistently grown over the past 5 years may feel squeezed, because the growth isn't enough to account for the rising cost of pretty much everything else. People tell me rent and housing costs eat up half of or more of their paycheck, says Dasha Kennedy, the financial educator and activist behind The Broke Black Girl. Childcare feels like a second rent. Healthcare costs come out of nowhere and wipe out savings. It's a never ending cycle. Trying to think of what to say in response to all this. Yeah, if you are willing to pay half of your paycheck in the name of, what is it, having a place to all to yourself, then that's your choice. That's probably what I would do, because I have personally spent my own money to have a hotel room all to myself on the last two times I went to upstate New York. Because the first time I went there since 2011 and I had to share a hotel room with my dad and my brother, I was not happy. But when I went the next two times and I spent my own money to get my own hotel room, like one all to myself, I was a lot happier. I enjoyed the trip a little bit more. And I have to say, I'm very likely to do this. Heck, I would pay as much as I had to and then eat as little as possible in the name of being able to have the place all to myself. Even if I don't own it, at the very least, I would have it to myself. That's just a me thing, though. You comment down below if it's worth that or not. Otherwise, there are solutions. They're called roommates. They might not be perfect, you might not want them, but at a certain point, you're gonna have to make a choice. Oh, also in response to the childcare one, all I'm gonna say is the possibility of getting help from extended family or grandparents is probably why not as many people move away from metropolitan areas when they're complaining about the cost of living. Like, pretty much the majority of all my living relatives are in the state of Massachusetts. Of course, I don't plan on having kids, so I'm free to move wherever I want and then just get a plane ticket back anytime I need to visit someone. It seems impossible to me that anyone who is not already wealthy could be riding out the cycle of existential instability without at least a little white knuckling through scarcity. But then I open Instagram. At some point over the last several summers, seemingly everyone I know started lounging along the Mediterranean, myself included. At home, at least according to my Explore page, they're lounging on the same designer sofas. Silent luxury is out. Power shouldered, fur coated, Wall Street wealth is in. But are the boom boom aesthetic business boys comfortably absorbing the cost of all that Armani, or are the algorithms, having given us daily glimpses into the highly varnished lives of the mega rich, pushing us all toward an unattainable lifestyle just as basics become unaffordable? Yeah, the algorithm and anyone who's posting those things are probably lying to some extent. The algorithm's pushing it to the top because it's a lot nicer than most of the setups that the average person has. And then a lot of people who are bragging about this are probably in a lot of debt, or they're just renting it out. I'm not talking about like paying rent to live somewhere nice. They probably are like renting it for the sake of a photo shoot. Don't believe everything you see on the internet, including this video. Or at the very least, take it with a grain of salt. Online, you can see someone on a boat. You can see someone skydiving, says Kara Perez, the financial educator behind the sustainable spending platform Bravely Go. That leads to these questions of, what am I doing wrong that I can't afford that? Or, you know what? I deserve that. Let me figure out a way to achieve that. Which usually means, let me put that on my credit card. If you see that the whole world has flocked to Europe, you may not rush to book a ticket, but you may do something small to give yourself an immediate dopamine hit. Door dashing yourself an Italian dinner, for example, or buying yourself a swimsuit for future Sicilian sunbathing. I'm somewhat guilty of this because I will buy a video game, but the difference is I make that pretty much the center of what I do that isn't the instant gratification job, everything I'm doing here for the channel right now, and occasionally trying to get out. I mean, I've been meaning to go out for walks more, but I keep finding myself getting so absorbed into my YouTube work that I decide, you know what? I think I'll just stay here. I don't need to go out. Now, I think video games are a good entertainment investment because you can get at least the number of hour here's a number of hours out of it that correlate to the number of dollars spent, if not more. Especially if you 100% it or play through it again later on. Adding to cart has become as second nature as reaching for your phone. And whether or not you're trying to shop, scrolling can quickly turn into browsing, which can quickly turn into buying when your credit card is already queued up in your digital wallet. Social commerce pits all of us up against a truly multi billion dollar advertising machine, says Perez. And once Trump's tariffs kick in, whether you are budgeting for a shine or a cents, it may cost us all that much more. Nobody can say. This is going to be going up from $5 to $12, Perez notes of expected increases. That makes everything feel tenuous, and it contributes to a lot of nebulous stress. Among her clients, affordability is the number one concern on everyone's mind. Perez doesn't view discretionary spending as the main driver behind widespread insecurity. Some people are overspending, she grants. And at the same time, we live in a very expensive country with a very high cost of living. There is a reason why more and more young people are apparently relying on Afterpay and other buy now, pay later services to cover the cost of trash bags. For too many people, fixed expenses has gotten out of control. That, or you just need to get a little creative. Up until about 2017, Clara, a writer in her 30s, and her husband were just barely able to afford living in New York. Now that they have two kids, they spend $4,000 per month on rent and around $3,000 per month on childcare, plus about $200 per week on Fresh Direct. Even though she and her husband are both earning more than they did when they welcomed their first child, the price of necessities has gotten so high that Clara, the lower paid of the two, has wondered if she can realistically afford to keep her job. I have had this discussion with myself where I'm like, would it make more sense to just stop working to save the cost of childcare? She says, do I need to give up everything I've worked for just so this can make sense? So far, her math suggests the money they'd save by would be too negligible to justify the sacrifice. But as to how she and her husband are getting by, we're in debt. Plug in what numbers you can that you feel comfortable sharing with ChatGPT. It can help you assess that. I used it to assess how to get the most out of or the bare minimum that I have to use the streaming services I have to get my money's worth. Now, you don't have to share the nitty-gritty details of your life with ChatGPT, but I'm just pitching solutions here. ChatGPT has been a good tool to me. I would look into using it where you can. Across the U.S., household debt is mounting, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported in February that Americans are not only taking out more loans, but also having a harder time paying them back. You don't need to squint to see why that is. Talking to my friends about money, one thing I have noticed is that regardless of socioeconomic background, regardless of existing debt or income or city of residence, everyone is feeling stretched. The differences between our income brackets, no longer decipherable based on who puts their card down when the bill comes, and who's thinking about buying a home versus who's looking for roommates, are leveling out. Whether they are confronting interest on a mortgage or the fact that a meager cost of living raise can't begin to cover the rent on an average one bedroom, friends and acquaintances keep serving up the same logic. When world governments seem content to let the planet nuke itself, what's the point in saving for the future? Spend on big experiences while it's still possible to have them. See Venice before it sinks. You may be living beyond your means, but at least you are living. I would describe this more as existing when you're not outside of the major moments. Like, what are you doing in between when you're going to Venice and when you're back home? I would love to know. All I'm going to say is maybe some period of sacrificing nicer things or comforts or pleasures is in order. You can have your hills to die on. Like, I've recently decided to go down to 2 movies per week that I watch. First, there's a Saturday movie I've told you all about, and now I'm alternating between a movie from Prime Video and a movie from Apple TV Plus, and then one, maybe 2 episodes of my primary TV show the other days. No more weekly drop episodes unless it is truly, genuinely must watch television. And if it's not must watch television, to the advertisements saying you should be watching this show because it drops weekly, to quote Logan Roy, fuck off. Seductive as economic nihilism may be, however, the safer bet is to assume that the future will happen and that it will bring more moments of stress. While most economists would agree that in the chaos department, Trump is really outdoing himself with his trade war, recessions are cyclical, notes financial educator Tiffany Elish, also known as the Budgetnista Elish. And I spoke before Liberation Day. But she is not wrong that expansion and contraction are an economy's natural rhythms. The bright side, if we're down, it's not forever. She proposes taking note of the things that you did that helped you save, as well as the out of reach items that would have made your life easier, and using the high times to stockpile for the inevitable lows ahead. For millennials and Gen Z, however, those highs may feel elusive. Our tenure in the workforce has been marked by global crisis after global crisis, recession after recession, layoff after layoff. Acknowledging that pattern, both Perez and Elish recommend talking to people about all of this stress. Shame shields solutions, says Elish. The suggestion cuts against the traditional grain of financial etiquette, which says talking about money is rude, but discussing salaries is how we find out we're being underpaid. Comparing prices is how we discover we've been ripped off. Publicly detailing how the many ways in which systemic failures have combined to screw over the masses is how we may begin to force change. And while you can't complain away student loan debt or that 40% rent hike, you can at least crowdsource workarounds to muffle their impact. Pool resources, or just find comfort in the fact you're not alone. Eggs may be $13, but talk? Just about the only thing that's still cheap. Okay, that was a clever conclusion. I'm gonna say that much. But I have to say, egg prices, where are they getting $13? Last I checked, the store brand and ones from Star Market were $6.49 for that. Pull it up on my phone. Actually, I'm gonna look it up the price really quick. So as you can see, $8 for an 18 count of store brand. Whoa, $5.49 for a dozen. But anyway, you get the idea. A lot of people are living beyond their means. Personally, with the whole mentality that you gotta see Venice before it sinks, A lot of these climate predictions that say things like that often don't end up coming true. So your best bet is to just live your life, take out what debt you absolutely have to, make the most of your degree if you end up going to college. And again, either colleges should be forced to, that's what we can do on your own. In terms of systemic changes, I think we need to either require that colleges guarantee a job after graduation, or your or the government's money back. Or if you want to get a loan, you gotta propose it the same way you would a business loan, highlighting the ROIs and all that. That is something, that is what, those are two ideas I would do, but you let me know in the comments down below what you think a better solution would be, or if you agree with either of mine. Give this video a like, subscribe for daily videos, and I'll see you soon.